Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, malware that lives in your browser, GitHub Enterprise's SQL scare, Dan's mail server war story, a righteous roundup, your feedback, and so much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Welcome to TechSNAP, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems, network, and administration podcast. This is episode 302 and was live streamed on January 10th, 2017. This program is brought to you by our three very fine sponsors, Ting, DigitalOcean, and IX Systems. With me today is our wonderful host, the organizer, the explainer, and the admin, Dan. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hello, Wes. Hello,
it's wonderful
Jeffra.
To see you again. I mean, it hasn't been very long, but what a pleasure.
About 4 hours or so?
Yeah, I think so. How was the rest of your day?
It was pretty good.
Excellent.
Did various things, all of which I can't talk about, but it was fun.
That sounds like the most fun. Well, let's jump right in. Today on our first story, we're talking about malware hosted in the browser. What does that mean, Dan?
Well, last show we talked about malware, blocking it via URLs, and malware which spoofs the domain names, thereby bypassing many URL-based filters. But in this show, we have an instance of malware which completely defeats all of the above in a very clever and simple way. A common way to steal credentials is to host a web page which looks a lot like the real thing. You know, Google, Facebook, PayPal, they're all targets of this. It's very simple to do. You just throw up a web page and start directing people at it and collect the information that comes in. There are lots of ways to defend this with conventional tools, but this method bypasses all those tools. Tom Scott tweeted about malware he received via email. And when you click on the link, you get what appears to be a Google login page. But the interesting thing about this is the URI is of the form data colon text.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I've heard of that one before. Interesting.
It is valid, and I don't think I've ever used it, but I've seen it. And then it puts some information in there that looks like a URL, a whole bunch of spaces, and then way off at the right-hand side, they show a source for JavaScript. And it's that JavaScript that pulls in the web page, which isn't really a web page. It's all just in your browser.
So by clicking this link, suddenly you've started to execute JavaScript that was just pulled in right from the URL.
Right, and that's displaying the web page, and that's what you log into, and it'll send your credentials away to someone. Now, I thought this was brand new, but it turns out that it's actually fairly common. It's been used often to phish Google or PayPal, and it's been around since at least a year. Matt Hughes reported that Android actually tries to autofill his Google account credentials when he goes to that URI.
So oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
It's fooling password managers and stuff like that. It's been around at least a year, and it was written by a researcher named DLink Cabin, and there's a URL for that in the show notes. And it's not new. It's just very unusual, and I also think it's very clever. And try to explain to technical novices that, no, you don't log in here, and this is why.
Yeah, that's a big conversation. That you have to have a kind of understanding of the technical architecture of the system you're using, which most people are using it because they don't have those things.
I don't know how to educate people about that. You just have to be really, really careful when you're entering in credentials. Fortunately, most people that are susceptible to this won't be using most people that will be using this, that'll be phished by this, aren't using a password manager, so their passwords probably aren't very complex anyway. But really, getting phished doesn't have the negative stigma it used to do. It is just so very, very good at the moment. And I'm not surprised that some highly notable people wind up getting phished by it. I don't know if I've been phished by it. Maybe I have, maybe I've not. But this is pretty good.
Right. It's something, I mean, even as a technical user, I might I might not actually notice that, especially with all the spaces there in the URL and the other tricks that they're using.
The trick to it is to look very carefully at the expanded. If you right-click in the image, say copy address, and then copy and paste that into your browser, you can actually see a great deal of detail on the URI, and you can actually see how they're doing this, and it makes much more sense when you look at the large image and scroll left and right and see how they're doing it. I don't know how they're going to avoid this one.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't either. It may be something where we have more heuristics built into browsers that can warn you about these things, where the expansion is very different than the render text. But even then, it seems like a tricky thing to get right.
You just have to look up there, look for the HTTPS, make sure it's the right domain, and just be careful. When you're suddenly presented with a login page, don't just enter in your credentials. Stop, think about it, look at what's going on, and then proceed, especially if it's your important accounts, like Google, like PayPal, anything like that, where it's very sensitive contents. You want to go very slowly.
Yeah, exactly. You should be trusted, and it's really easy to just kind of click around on the web. You said you've clicked a bunch of things or someone sent you something, but especially if it comes from somewhere that you don't trust or it's an unusual link, just spend a few minutes and be sure of your safety.
Yeah. Indeed.
Well, thank you very much for that explanation, Dan. Before we move on to our next story, let's talk about our first sponsor today, which is IX Systems. IX Systems builds beautiful servers, just the most bespoke server that you can imagine for your perfect needs. They use incredible Intel processors. If you take your work seriously, if you don't want to, I've had so many friends that they've built themselves a nice big ZFS array. They've been tinkering with it, which is a great thing to do. I encourage you to do that. But if you're ready to have an appliance, if you're ready to have a server that's configured professionally, you don't want to mess with, I encrypted my disk and I've lost my I've lost my key, or, I set up the array, but I did it wrong and I used a stripe and I really wanted redundancy and now I've lost half my data. If these are not situations that you want to get in, go check out ixsystems.com. Tell them that you found them from us by going to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. They're always doing cool stuff. Over here on their blog, they've got a rundown, the top 10 articles in 2016. Gives you a nice flavor of all the neat things that IX is doing. A bunch of stuff about FreeNAS. FreeNAS is a wonderful platform. It's perfect if you need a NAS for home, you need a NAS for your small office. And they've also packed in a ton of stuff. You can have this one server running in your house. You can do it can do pretty much everything. You can run your own, it can run DNS mask, it can run a VPN client for you, plus it can securely, efficiently manage your storage. They're very involved in the OpenZFS project. They work upstream with the community. They work on, what's now called TrueOS. So they're truly a company that cares about the open source community. Their business model is based on open source. Check them out today, ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. All right, Dan, so we've got our next story up here. It looks like there is a SQL injection attack on GitHub Enterprise.
Yes, there is, and it's been fixed. It's been fixed after the author of this blog post did the responsible thing. They did the research, they did it in a safe way, and then they told GitHub about it, and they took the bug bounty. We'll get to that at the end. So the story involves responsible research and disclosure by Orange C. Ty? Yeah, we've got his name. I'm pronouncing it wrong, sorry. GitHub Enterprise is the on-premises version of GitHub.com, where you can deploy a whole GitHub service in your private network for business.
I've used it at work before. Yeah, it's like a full GitHub stack that you can integrate with. Yep. It does OAuth. It does everything.
I've seen this in commercial settings. You can get a 45-day free trial, and you can download the VM from enterprisegithub.com. So this guy decided to have a look and downloaded it, configured it, and observations began. It was first noticed that GitHub is using a custom library to obfuscate their code. So if you search for rubyconcealer.so on Google, you'll find a snippet and a gist. And in there, it shows you how to de-obfuscate the code. So the first 2 days are getting the VM running. days 3 to 5 are learning Rails by code reviewing, because GitHub Enterprise is written with Ruby on Rails.
That's right.
And on day 6, an SQL injection was found. Now, after the injection is found, they do some tests. They do a simple reproduction, proof of concept to make sure that it works. And now we'll talk about the timeline of the responsible disclosure. It was on January 26th that they reported the vulnerability to GitHub via HackerOne. They provide more vulnerability detail. GitHub validated that the issue existed, and GitHub responds that the fix will be included with the next release of GitHub. GitHub said, okay, thank you for this. Here's your $5,000 reward. $5,000. That's not bad for 6 days.
No, that's really not.
That's very good. He asked for permission to write a blog post. GitHub said sure, and we have it all right here. So if you're running GitHub Enterprise, version 2.85 has the fix, and it was released 2 days ago. 5 days ago. It was released 5 days ago. So I'm sure everyone is patched by now.
Yeah, I would hope so. It's nice to see GitHub doing the right thing and, accepting these kinds of things, promoting the bug bounty program, jumping on it and releasing a fix as soon as they can. And I mean, I imagine that, it's less bad than if the public GitHub infrastructure had something like this, but it's never good, especially, there's a lot of places that depend on GitHub. That's where, maybe you're trying to make signed commits there. That's where the source of truth for the things that end up on your production servers are. It could be a big deal if, someone can squirrel in there and mess with your production code.
And I think it's great the way that this researcher did it. It was all above board. They did the right thing. They weren't hacking into somebody else's GitHub Enterprise installation. They downloaded their own, tested it there, and then
really on the up and up thing.
Got their just rewards.
All right. Well, here on TechSNAP, we always love it when viewers write in, give us feedback, tell us how we're doing a bad job, a good job, or just have something interesting to share with the audience. So today we've got a feedback item. It starts, hello, Chris, Alan, and Chris. These are addressing the old host, but we'll jump in here, and I think we can answer. We can read this just fine. If you'd like to continue and show us this exciting feedback.
I will. I'm a senior architect manager at a Fortune 100 company that you've definitely heard of, but which I can't name. And earlier this year, I was looking to add a couple of seasoned sysadmins to my team. One of my favorite interview questions is, how do you stay current on industry news, patches, security, products, etc.? Because I've always found that one of the best indicators of technical passion, which almost always maps direct to creativity and success here. Usually I hear /dot or ARS, which are decent answers, but not standouts. So I was floored when one guy said, a couple of podcasts like TechSNAP, BSC Now, and the Linux Action Show from Jupe, I actually cut him off there to save him the trouble of going into detail. And instead, we spent the next 15 minutes talking about our favorite episodes and the nearly unlimited tips we've picked up from you guys over the years. He was easily one of the most solid, qualified applicants I've seen in years. And yes, we made him a very solid offer. Unfortunately, right after that, his wife got a can't refuse job offer overseas, and he declined the position and moved. I don't have a question. I just wanted to let you and your audience know the value of your shows from an unusual angle. Jason. Thank you, Jason. That's very kind.
Yeah, thank you.
Very, very interesting.
I know the people on this network put in a lot of hard work. They like to. It's good to hear that those efforts, those efforts are appreciated. Dan, in your life and your career, have you ever had a moment or you had a similar situation where you've interviewed candidates or been on an interview board where it's kind of similar qualities stuck out about them?
I can't think of any, but I know that I remember interviewing some people who said that they went to various conferences, they did various things, and that's always often an indicator as well. When you're spending your own money to go to a conference, that's a big deal. Yeah,
exactly. And it kind of shows that, you're aware of the community, you're participating in it. It's something that you read in your spare time. So speaking of that, let's mention our next sponsor, which is DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean provides virtual virtual private servers, but not just your ordinary virtual private server. They have all KVM virtualizers. They have SSDs, 10 gigabit Ethernet right into the hypervisor, 40 gigabit even now. DigitalOcean is great. They're a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. You know, if you're looking for a way to kind of stand out in your next job interview, try DigitalOcean. It's a great place for $5 a month, $10 a month. They have hourly pricing if you don't need something for a full month. It's a great place to have a server. You can, you know, it's a nice sandbox server to try things out. Learn the software that you think you might be interviewed on. Plus, a lot of people in the industry know about DigitalOcean. It's what they use maybe at work. Maybe they use it for their private servers. It can get you a lot of credit. Additionally, DigitalOcean just has a wonderful community. They've really built a lot of the back of the company on this community. They have real editors working to take community submissions, make them better, and then they're available publicly. You know, it's not just something you have to sign up and pay money to see their community documentation. DigitalOcean understands the value that open source community provides. So if you value DigitalOcean, use our promo code. You'll get a $10 credit. It's SnapOcean. So go to DigitalOcean.com. Tell them that Jupiter Broadcasting sent them SnapOcean. They've got data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, Toronto, and Frankfurt. That list gets longer every time I read it. Go to DigitalOcean today and check them out. Thank you to DigitalOcean for continuing providing hosting, sponsorship, and just about everything else to the Jupiter Broadcasting Network. So, Dan, I hear you've got a war story here.
I do. Before we get into that, I just want to say I did help a friend get set up on DigitalOcean, and
really?
their little instance is just running just fine. Bunch of email, bunch of Dovecot, and they're going well. They like it.
Oh, that's great to hear.
I think they have the $20 server. I'm not sure. Anyway, the horror story. Like most sysadmins who play around with this stuff at home, I run my own mail servers. I have a couple of outgoing mail servers here at home. They're named Cliff, and they sit here, and all the servers that need to send mail out to something, that mail goes out into the ether from Cliff.
Oh, that's great. That's a good name, too. I like that.
And my laptops and my cell phones do something similar. But since they're mobile, they have to send to things that are out there on the internet. They send to a host named Claven. Now, Claven is the one that has had the problem. I decided to change the certificate because the certificate was expiring, and I didn't want to continue to use Start SSL.
I've had the same conclusion.
There have been some interesting things happen recently. So I said, hey, I have my own CA here at home. Why don't I just generate a certificate from that and upload it there? I've been using that for years and it works just fine. And from a strictly security point of view, a private CA is more secure for non-public services than a public CA is.
Why do you say that?
The reason being, if the CA is compromised, they can issue a certificate for your domain. Sure. Whereas the only people that can issue a certificate for my CA is me. So if I secure my CA, all the certificates are secure.
Right, and it kind of changes the threat model too. Like a passerby, unless you're really being targeted, they're not going to attack your CA server, right? But they may want to do a public one.
Right. So I wind up having my own CA, issue my own certificates, push them out to the Claven servers, and everything runs fine on my laptop. I do that on December 31st. I go to send email on the 4th or the 5th from my cell phone, and it won't go. It just won't go. It says it can't validate it can't validate the certificate of my server.
So problem signs already. Like, ugh.
Yeah, it can't do it. Okay, well, the solution there is to take the CA certificate, upload it to my cell phone, and say, you can trust this certificate. That works just fine, and it still won't allow me to send email out, even though it trusts the certificate, even though it trusts the CA. So someone said, no, that's not how you do it. You have to put it in a profile and then push that profile to the phone.
I see. Interesting.
And I said, Yeah, I've done this before. Let me do it again. Eventually, I find the new Apple Configurator tool, create a profile, push it to my phone. Still does not work. So you can go to the next image now. This first image that you see here is actually what was on my phone to begin with. Then I added a configuration profile that had the right certs in it, and it still wouldn't work. So a couple of days later, on Twitter, someone said, well, maybe there's something wrong with your certificate. So I had a look at my certificate. My certificate was an MD5 cert. This is very old. They've been deprecated.
Oh, that's right.
So what I had to do was go back to my certificate authority, which had been created maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And I use all in-house. It works just fine. And create a brand new certificate authority, issue a new cert with SHA-256 instead of MD5, push that to my phone in a profile, and bang, my outgoing email works magically.
Oh,
So
very nice.
Next photo. And this is what you're going for. You want to have your certificate authority listed under certificate trust settings. This is a screenshot from an iPhone 7.
Okay,
Someone
nice.
was asking if it was from Android or whatever. But this comes out of the iPhone, and there is a tool you can download for free called the Apple Configurator.
We'll have to add that to the docs.
Yeah, and you just basically push that into your phone over a USB cable.
This is great because I know, there's a lot of people out there. Maybe you need an iPhone for some things, or you prefer the security of that platform. So it's nice to be able to have this kind of flexibility. You can do things like this where you've got your own certificates in there. Maybe you've configured your own VPN back to your own servers.
Yeah. And I'm sure I've added CAcert and Start.com into previous phones like years ago, and it's just been carried on from one phone to the next.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So how long did it take you to get all of this resolved?
It was over a number of days because I abandoned it at one point, and I didn't discover it for about 4 or 5 days after, because the laptops, they would say, hey, listen, I don't trust this cert. And you could say, no, go ahead, you can trust this cert. And it would trust it and would use it. But the iPhones would not. I imagine that the security settings in the phone is just slightly different. And it says, no, this is an old standard. I'm not going to trust it. So I would say it was about 5 or 6 hours of playing around and trying to figure out what was going wrong. And then in one morning, sitting at Starbucks, reading a tweet off my Twitter stream, I'll have to give credit to that person later. They just said, maybe there's something wrong with your cert. And that was it.
You hadn't thought to look into that area. It had worked perfectly in the past. I mean, it's a good little microcosm of how even if you're an experienced troubleshooter, sometimes those little things you just haven't really thought through the full chain. And especially, our modern systems are very complex. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, as you've discussed. That's very interesting. I'm glad that it's working again. And I will say, I'm quite envious of your home mail server setup, and I may have to replicate that in the coming episodes. It's something maybe we should do a deep dive in on one of the later shows.
Yep. It's I've done it mostly just for my own purposes because I'm running all my own incoming mail servers anyway. So
I see.
I have the outgoing as well.
All right, Dan, let's get to this rockin' roundup. What's first on the list?
Well, first on the list, and full disclosure before I start this, I'm going to talk about 2 conferences, and I'm the founder of both of these conferences.
That's awesome. Well, I think you have every right to talk about it then.
Thank you very much, but I always like to be upfront when there is a possibility of perceived conflict of interest. BSD CAN. BSD CAN is the BSD conference. If you have any interest in BSD, you want to go to BSD CAN in Ottawa. The call for papers is out now. It closes in 9 days. Just follow the URL and submit a paper. You don't have to get very complicated, and it's very straightforward. If you have any questions, you can tweet at me or ask around.
I know we've talked about it a little bit in the past on the show, but is there a quick rundown of BSDCan, things you like about it as a conference, things that might stand out to users or viewers who aren't familiar?
Most BSD conferences are small in comparison to your traditional open source conferences. You can go and talk to people who you've only ever heard about, you've only ever read about, you've never met in person, and there's basically the people that you've been looking up to, people you've been taking advice from. You can talk to them and ask some questions and just have a real conversation. The conference is designed so that the hallway track is one of the most important parts of the conference.
Oh, I love that.
There's a half hour between all the talks. You've got plenty of time to get from one talk to the other. They're not very far away, but you've got plenty of time to stop and have a conversation. It's very social, but you're not forced into the social sides if you don't want to be social. Whatever your definition of social is, you can take care of it while you're at BSDCan.
Oh, that's great. Well, then everyone should consider putting in call to papers, or at least go check it out. You can say hi to Dan.
I'll be there.
All right. There's another call for papers out. What's next?
Well, the other conference is PGCon. It's about 3 or 4 weeks before BSDCan, and it's at the same location. It's in Ottawa. PGCon is a conference for users and developers of Postgres. So Postgres just happens to be the world's leading database, and it just happens to be open source. I've been using it for many years. I wrote the website Fresh Ports using it, and that's how I first got into it. And the PGCon, the Postgres community needed a conference, so I was approached and said, "Hey, listen, you're doing a good job with BSDCan. You want to run Postgres
You want to do one for us?"
Yeah, and so I said, "Sure." And now it's my favorite Postgres conference. The call for papers for that is also open, and it closes in 9 days. So if you're using Postgres, go and submit a paper. And if you're not using if you don't want to submit a paper, just come to the conference anyway. It's very similar in nature and feel to BSDCan, so you'll have a great time there.
Well, thank you very much for that update. Those will both be two things I'm looking for. I know Postgres has always been my go-to database anytime I need a SQL database.
It's solid.
All right, well then let's talk about our final sponsor, and that is Ting. Ting is mobile that makes sense. No BS mobile service. They've got CDMA, they've got GSM, and most of all, what's important is it's pay for what you use. It just starts with just $6 a line. Then you pay for what you use. Select how many minutes, how many messages, how much data. Some things, maybe you're playing with SIP like I am or like Noah has, and all you need is data. I know that's pretty cheap. And the great thing about Ting, they make it super simple to figure that out. Go to their rates page right here, and they've got this beautiful grid. I've used it pretty much all the time. Just click how many you need, fill in the buckets. Let's say you've got 3 lines, $6 each. That's only $18. There's no add-on charges for voicemail, caller ID, or tethering. Use your phone like you want. Is it your mobile workstation? Great. Is it the phone that you give to your grandma to contact when you need her? Even better. At $6 a line, that's something that you can afford. To tell Ting that you heard about them through us, go to techsnap.ting.com. Yeah, it's a great URL. techsnap.ting.com. We love Ting. They're my mobile service provider. There's Noah's mobile service provider, and they're Chris's mobile service provider. So they're just about the closest thing to an official JB mobile service provider as could possibly exist. There's no early termination fees. You pay for what you use. It's mobile that just makes sense. Thank you for sponsoring, and visit techsnap.ting.com. All right, Dan, what's next in this Rockin' Roundup?
Well, we have a very small and interesting article where the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is it federal?
Yeah, Federal Trade Commission.
Yeah. The FTC in the U.S. are suing DLink.
Uh-oh. What did DLink do this time?
Well, apparently the FTC is kind of unhappy with the way that DLink is not securing their devices. As outlined by the FTC, that includes guest login credentials allowing unauthorized access to DLink cameras, command injection software that enables remote attackers to take control of routers, and mishandling of a private key code and leaving users' mobile login credentials unencrypted.
That sounds pretty bad.
That's a lot of stuff. Now, naturally, DLink says, working intensely, and the company is fighting what it calls unwarranted and baseless charges made by the FTC. I'm with the FTC on this one. Anything that they can do to start making manufacturers own up to the Internet of Things that they have been creating and do a better job of maintaining them and securing our devices, I'm behind them.
I completely agree. And it's kind of a shame, especially here, this article here showing a rather fancy high-end D-Link router. It's a shame that we have done such a bad job in terms of public perception, and that the market doesn't really dictate that they have to take security seriously, right? They can sell fancy things, they can make money doing that. So it seems like the FTC pushing back, generating some press about this is a good way to encourage users to have that be something that at least, it won't be perfect, but at least a check mark that they're looking for when they go look to buy a new device.
Most people don't have the time or the inclination to upgrade their devices. They really don't. They're busy with families and life and jobs and stuff like that. Things all of us are busy with.
Exactly.
But they're not concerned with upgrading these things. Not at all. They have no interest. So let's find a better solution.
Yeah. What do you think? Is there anything that stands out to you as something that people could do to stay away? Is there a good list of devices people can look for? I know we talk a lot about if you have an Android phone, you should really do a Google-backed one so you get updates. Is there anything like that in the router arena?
Well, there's all kinds of options for buying routers and stuff like that, but they get a bit complex and a bit beyond what the average user is going to be willing to put up with. The majority of people are not technical enough to want to use one of these things. That they want something they can take home, install, and use, and just have it working. I don't have an answer at the moment.
Yeah, I feel you there. It's not a great situation. So hopefully we see more actions like this from the FTC and that more manufacturers shape up. And for our final story here, we've got something just a little bit kind of amusing. What is it, Dan?
Well, there is a story on accidental orders which begat an accidental order.
This is a meta order terrible problem.
Yeah. Well, a San Diego TV station sparked complaints after an on-air report about a little girl who ordered a dollhouse via her parents' Amazon Echo caused echoes in viewers' home to also attempt to order dollhouses.
Wow.
I think this is wonderful.
Break that down for us.
The Amazon Echo, if you're not familiar with it, is a device that sits in your house, and it's an Internet of Things device, and you give it voice commands, and you preface those voice commands with the device's name. So this will spark, what I'm about to say will spark a lot of action in people who happen to have an Amazon Echo around, but it'll be benign and won't cause any issues. So you can say, Alexa, what time is it? And anyone who has an Amazon Echo will now be hearing Alexa say the time. Now, the Echo can respond to, I think, 3 or 4 different fixed names. You can't assign a random name, but you can choose one of those 4 names. And what this person did is, during the story, it says, I love the little girl saying, order me a dollhouse. And everyone that was listening to that show got ordered a dollhouse. So you can do other things as well. If you've got an iPhone, you can say, hey Siri, what time is it?
It's 7:21 p.m. Good evening, Dan.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Or hey Cortana, what time is it? I don't know what the Google name is. I don't know how to do that one. But
okay,
I'm sure
Google.
someone... Hey Google?
Okay,
hey
Google.
okay, Google.
There you go.
What
Perfect.
time is it?
And they will
So-
respond in kind.
Yeah. So I apologize to everyone whose devices I just triggered, but I'm sure that something's going to come of this eventually. I'm sure that I wouldn't be surprised if people start embedding this into audio. I know I've seen my Alexa act up when there's been ads on TV or TV shows that even just use the name.
I wonder if
But-
there's any way to exploit, kind of vocal ranges outside of human hearing or on the edges, or how close, if they can figure out ways to trigger Alexa without making it obvious to humans as well.
I just heard one. I just heard someone's Alexa quiet down. I don't know. I think the easiest way to avoid this is to call your Amazon Echo by something other than Alexa.
Right. Yeah, that seems. So when you got this, have you had any security concerns, operational concerns, or otherwise using these devices in your own home?
I have all of these devices on their own VLAN. They can't access the rest of my networks. They get upgraded automatically, and that's about it. I have disabled automated purchase.
Oh, that seems like a pretty good idea, unless you actually use it.
No, I don't. I order online. I don't use
It's convenient
I don't use
enough.
the Echo. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that is kind of a nightmare and also a funny reminder of the complex world that we are living in today.
It's astounding. Oh, I
We
wonder
live in
how
funny
Amazon. I wonder how Amazon canceled those orders.
Yeah, hopefully. They're usually pretty good at that, but hopefully there was a good faith, or if you can remember to go have it canceled really fast right after. Well, thank you very much for explaining that to us, Dan. I think now we've come to the end of this episode. This has been TechSNAP, episode 302, live streamed to you on January 10th, 2017. If you'd like to see more of TechSNAP or any of the other fine Jupiter Broadcasting programs, go over to www.jupiterbroadcasting.com. Or if you'd like to get more of myself or Dan, find us on Twitter. Dan is at TechSNAP_Dan, and I am at Wes Payne. Thank you very much for joining me, Dan, and have a wonderful week.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you, chat room.
Bye, guys.
Much appreciated.